Welcome back everyone to the XRP price chart, where we have a look at how XRP is playing out, if it's still performing like our Litecoin pattern here, which we've drawn reference to, where we think XRP is currently sitting in this moment right here. And then to tie it all in, we have a look at the XRP dominance here, which XRP has currently been following our fractal here from early November, which was the last time when XRP's price exploded to the upside. So let's jump into this update, have a look at everything we spoke about last episode, what we were expecting for XRP price chart, and how all that's playing out. So if you caught last week's XRP video, you'll see how we spoke about how this was quite likely just a B leg here for Bitcoin on the left, and that Bitcoin's price would break back to the upside here and grab liquidity from the top of this zone, similar to the way it did on the right side here, which is back in May last year, where Bitcoin had just broken through an all-time high and had got into a correction phase, in which we've seen the ABC correction come out here for Bitcoin, and that we have likely moved up into a phase like this here on the Bitcoin price chart, and that Bitcoin is coming in for the top of its B leg now after the recent push we've had in the last 24 hours, bringing Bitcoin all the way up to about 110,000. So we'll be closely monitoring how things play out on Bitcoin and seeing if we can start to see some corrective structures come out here after this impulsive move that we've had, similar to the way things worked out on the right side here back in May last year, where we did see quite an impulsive shoot up to the upside, and then we've seen these corrective structures come out, and then eventually it rolled over, and that's what gave us our C leg on the Bitcoin price chart. And so far what we've seen in the last 10 hours here on Bitcoin looks like the beginning of that corrective phase, but we'll have to see how things play out over time. And what that means for the XRP price chart here is that if Bitcoin is to go in for a corrective move from these levels here, that it's quite likely going to negatively impact the XRP price chart and potentially give us those lows of around $2 that we spoke about last episode. So I don't think we're out of the woods here yet for Bitcoin, and I don't think that XRP is going to go shooting to the upside in a moment like this while Bitcoin sells off and goes in for that C leg. However, I still think that there could be a bullish situation here, and that this is what we want to look for if we want to see bullish continuation for the XRP price chart. The first thing is having a look at our Litecoin example here, where we can see that once Litecoin had found support on this trend line here, similar to the way XRP price is finding support on this trend line here, after going through a break of the all-time high and a consolidation structure like we've seen on XRP over the last few months, Litecoin's structure performed very similar after breaking through an all-time high, going into a consolidation structure, and now playing out the way it is, which is quite similar to the way that XRP has been playing out. And that what came next on Litecoin was this gradual move to the upside, where we started to see Litecoin's price expand, and then Litecoin's price eventually went for that full 4.236 extension from this range that it was in now, and that is how we are looking for our price targets on XRP, which should give us roughly that $8 to $9 XRP. If XRP does do that full extension of the same zone, we will likely get those same price targets that we're looking for here on XRP, around $8 to $9. So the next move on the Litecoin chart here, after we went through this correction, was to see Litecoin's price shoot to the upside, which essentially is what we have marked out here in blue on the XRP price chart, and how that roughly should look. And I think that this is the base case bullish thing to expect here for XRP if we want to see a continuation like this, and that likely, instead of this being the top of the B leg here for Bitcoin, Bitcoin's price can push out from the highs here. And then what we're going to see on Bitcoin is something like our Ethereum example we have here over on the right side, where once price did push out to these highs like we have here, which would be similar to the way we have pushed out today, that the next move would be an expansion in the Bitcoin price chart, similar to the way Ethereum expanded back in 2021 here in this final moment of its bull market. And that in a moment like this, we could see XRP shoot to the upside, similar to the way Litecoin shot to the upside, and that this would be the environment where you'd see something like this play out on XRP. On top of that, we have the XRP dominance here, which has been tracking quite accurately to this fractal here, which is from back in November last year, where we've seen XRP price shoot to the upside in this moment here and outperform the rest of the market, and that the entire fractal is this zone here that we've grabbed, and that now what we're seeing on the XRP price chart is a similar time and structure breakdown of the dominance, and then the way it reacted here in these final moments is quite similar to the way it's playing out right now, and that leaves us with a rough end date of this dominance breaking down on XRP at roughly the 19th to the 20th of June, which means that roughly around those dates, if this is to continue play out and we see the XRP dominance play out the same way it did back in November last year, that we could start to see XRP outperform the whole market, which would line up with our price chart that we have here and would line up with the way Litecoin performed back in 2017. So I think that's the most bullish case here for XRP. However, to see this bullish scenario play out here on XRP, I would expect Bitcoin to have to push to the highs from here, as I don't see Bitcoin breaking down here and coming in for this C leg that we've been waiting for, and XRP somehow holding structure here and moving to the upside in a moment like this where Bitcoin is breaking down and coming in for that C leg like it did on the right side here in its mid 2024 correction. So as far as things go for XRP, I think it's a matter of waiting to see how Bitcoin plays out here, and if we can see Bitcoin break out from these highs, deviate from this fractal here on the right, and what we start to see is actually what we're seeing in this moment here that we have highlighted on the right side, where Bitcoin breaks back through that all-time high that it set, which would be like breaking back through this 111,000 high here on the left, and then we can see support actually start to get found on top of that high the way it did there. And that if we were to see a moment like this, that would likely be confirmation that Bitcoin is going to continue breaking to the upside, and that we could see XRP shoot up in this moment here, just same way it did back in November last year in that moment right there. So I think right now it's just a waiting game to see how Bitcoin's going to react at these levels. And if we do see a rejection from these levels, it's the most likely that Bitcoin is going to come in for that C leg and sell off to that $98,000 area that we've been looking for. And I think the way that affects the XRP price chart could be quite bad and send XRP down into those low $2 areas. So two scenarios to look out for, and that's basically how we're trading the XRP price chart at the moment and trying to take in the dominance into account here, and that roughly this all could wrap up in the next 10 days. And if you're keeping up with news regarding to Ripple and XRP, you'll see that on the 16th of June, they're actually settling their court date, which is the final moment before either side can provide any evidence to seal this case up. Otherwise, the case will be dismissed and XRP's price most likely will react quite well on news like that. So that's right here in this moment, about 3 to 4 days before this fractal should wrap up. So we'll be monitoring that over the next 2 weeks to see how that all plays out. Now, last week someone asked a question about the XLM price chart, which is Stellar Lumens here, and they wanted some technical analysis done here on how XLM is behaving in comparison to the rest of the market. And for anyone that's been around crypto a long time, especially in the XRP community and the XLM community, will know that XLM, especially in its bear market, would react on good news for XRP. These two moments we've seen here are the same as these two moments we've seen right here, where XRP and XLM pumped at the exact same time based on good news that came out for XRP. So these coins are strangely linked. However, I think the one thing to take into consideration here is that during XLM's pump here in the start of the year when XRP also moved up, we've seen a 630% price increase on XLM in comparison to XRP in the same move during the same time. We've seen a price increase of about nearly 600% here for XRP. So these coins do respond quite similar, even expand at the same times and have similar percentage size increases. However, you can see that so far in the way that price has been reacting over the last few months, XLM is down over 70%, while XRP has held these highs quite well, only down 50%. And I think the best way to have a look at the XLM price chart is to assume that it is like XRP's little brother, and it does perform quite similar. However, it doesn't hold up as well in the sell-off. So I think as far as XLM goes, XRP is just a stronger version of that. So that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on here for the XRP price chart, and that hopefully in the next few weeks we should start to see these fractals come to a close. We should definitely see confirmation on Bitcoin on how that's going to play out, if we are going to be in this breakout moment here, or if we're only at the top of this B wave here and that there is a much steeper correction to come in for Bitcoin still. And that, depending on what happens there on the Bitcoin price chart, will dictate which scenario is going to play out on XRP, which is either blue scenario we have marked out here on the right, which is taken from the Litecoin example, or are we going to see a deeper C wave correction down to these lows here where we could see a sub $2 XRP again. And in the meantime, it's just a matter of waiting to see which one plays out, and that is all based on the way Bitcoin's price is going to react at these levels. So I'll see you guys back on Friday for the weekly recap, where maybe we can get a bit more confirmation on how things are going to play out here, and maybe set up some trades and our biases based on what we see play out here on the Bitcoin price chart, especially when it comes to trading XRP as well. So if you're new here, feel free to subscribe and leave a like on the video. It helps a lot. If you have any questions, drop them down below in the comments section, and I'll see you guys back on Friday for the weekly recap.